The United States national debt is growing 2025 $52,000 per second. Not per minute, per second. The total? As of late 2025, $38 trillion. That is $109,000 owed for every single American alive today, man, woman and child. And in fiscal year 2025, for the first time in American history, the government spent more money paying interest on its debt than it spent on the entire United States military. $970 billion in interest. $917 billion on defense. Not on roads, not on schools, not on healthcare, on interest. On the cost of past spending. This is the debt map. And what it shows about America and the world should concern every single one of us. According to the International Monetary Fund's October 2025 World Economic Outlook, the global average debt-to-GDP ratio now stands at 94.7%. Nearly the entire world's annual economic output owed as debt. But the map does not look equal. Japan sits at the extreme end, 230% debt to GDP. The highest of any major economy on Earth. Japan owes more than twice the value of everything it produces in an entire year. Sudan follows at 222%, Singapore at 176%, Greece at 147%, Italy at 137%. The United States sits at approximately 126% of GDP, ranking 11th globally. Behind Japan, Singapore, Sudan, Greece and Italy, but ahead of France, the United Kingdom and China. And at the other end of the map, the financially healthy nations. Norway, with massive sovereign wealth funds built on oil revenues. Estonia, Switzerland, Saudi Arabia, countries whose governments owe relatively little compared to what they produce. Same world, dramatically different fiscal positions. And the gap is widening every year. Let us look specifically at America's numbers, because they tell a story that most Americans have never seen laid out this clearly. In July 2025, Congress raised the debt ceiling to 2025 $41.1 trillion, up from $36.1 trillion set just 6 months earlier. The debt limit has been raised, suspended, or modified over 100 times since it was created in 1917. The debt grew by $2 trillion in fiscal year 2025 alone. That is $6 billion added every single day. 4.5 million every minute. But here is the number that should alarm every American taxpayer. In fiscal year 2025, the United States paid $970 billion in net interest payments on its debt. That is more than the Pentagon, more than Medicaid, more than veterans' benefits, transportation, education and environmental protection combined, and the Congressional Budget Office projects interest payments will hit $1 trillion in 2026 and $1.8 trillion by 2035. America is paying $2.8 billion per day just in interest. By 2036, that rises to $5.9 billion per day. That is not money building anything. It is money servicing the cost of the past. At this point, many viewers are asking, if Japan has 230% debt to GDP and is still functioning, why should America worry about 126%? It is a legitimate question. And the answer reveals something critical about how debt actually works on the global map. Japan's debt is overwhelmingly held domestically. Over 90% of Japanese government bonds are owned by Japanese institutions, the Bank of Japan, pension funds, insurance companies. Japan essentially owes money to itself, which means the political and market pressure to default is minimal. The United States situation is different in both scale and structure. Of America's $32 trillion in publicly held debt, foreign nations hold approximately $8.5 trillion. Japan alone holds $1.1 trillion. China holds approximately $760 billion. This means American fiscal decisions have direct consequences for foreign creditors, and their decisions have direct consequences for American interest rates. The United States also benefits from one structural advantage no other country possesses: the dollar is the world's reserve currency. Global demand for dollar-denominated assets sustains demand for U.S. Treasury bonds even at rising debt levels. But economists increasingly warn this advantage is not unconditional. It requires that global confidence in American fiscal management remains intact, and that confidence is not guaranteed. The fundamental question economists are debating right now is whether the United States or the world is approaching a debt tipping point. The Rand Corporation noted in late 2025 that U.S. federal debt has hit $38 trillion, approximately equal to the entire U.S. economy, and that interest payments now cost more than national defense. They also noted that the United States has successfully reduced its debt burden before after World War II, and that fiscal discipline, smarter spending and stronger growth can do it again. But the window for action is narrowing. China's debt rose 8 percentage points in 2025 alone, reaching 96% of GDP. The global debt average has risen from 92.4% last year to 94.7% this year. The entire world is borrowing more at higher interest rates with slower growth. The most dangerous scenario economists identify is not a sudden default. It is a slow fiscal squeeze where rising interest payments gradually crowd out every other government priority. Education, infrastructure, defense, healthcare, slowly replaced by debt service, until a government can no longer invest in its own future because it is too busy paying for its past. The debt map tells a clear story. The world has never owed more money than it does right now. America's debt is growing faster than its economy. Interest payments have surpassed the defense budget for the first time in history. And the Congressional Budget Office projects interest costs will reach $1.8 trillion by 2035, consuming an ever larger share of every tax dollar Americans pay. The United States has faced debt crises before and emerged stronger. After World War II, debt to GDP exceeded 100%, and America grew its way out through decades of strong economic expansion. But the conditions of 2025 are not the conditions of 1945. Interest rates are higher, growth is slower, and the political will to address the deficit from either party remains elusive. The debt counter is running at $52,000 per second. The question is not whether it matters. The question is when. If this analysis changed how you think about government debt and the global economy,